Steve Bannon was found guilty last week for ignoring a subpoena that the House Select Committee on January 6th issued. The former political advisor to Donald Trump was convicted of 2 counts of contempt of Congress, and he could face up to 2 years in jail. After the ruling, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard took to Twitter to point out that while Bannon was charged, other high-level government officials who have lied to Congress got off scot-free. Here's what she had to say.
No matter what you think or feel about Steve Bannon, the fact that he has been found guilty of contempt of Congress, yet others have faced no consequences at all, people like James Clapper, for example, sat before the U.S. Senate under oath and lied directly about an NSA program that was conducting mass collection on millions of Americans. Or John Brennan, for example, as CIA director, he spied on Senate staffers, lied about it, and also broke into Senate computers to read emails from whistleblowers to members of Congress. Now, both Clapper and Brennan kept their jobs and to this day still have faced no consequences at all, what to speak of being charged and prosecuted and found guilty of the crimes that they committed. Now, this is just the latest example, unfortunately, of how our Department of Justice has become a political weapon being used by those in power to go after their political enemies.
It's a good point. And not only are Brennan and Clapper never prosecuted or punished for their lies, they're not even disgraced. They're celebrated. They're regular fixtures on cable news. They're held up as experts on national security, despite the fact that they routinely violated Americans' civil liberties. So I think Tulsi makes a great point here. Now, as to the underlying Steve Bannon matter, it does seem pretty clear that he defied this subpoena, and yes, you're going to get prosecuted if you do that. And I think anyone in that situation would have been prosecuted. So I don't have a tremendous he did what causes you to potentially face a jail charge. So it's not. I don't think they're treating him uniquely badly because he's being persecuted or something, maybe in other ways, but in this way it doesn't quite seem like political persecution to me. I don't know if that's what he's alleging that it is, but it seems like just exactly how you would handle someone who behaves that way in that situation. What do you think?
Oh, I think I disagree with you. This does smack to me of kind of politicking with the DOJ. I mean, there's so many examples of people who they did not take up, the contempt charge against. And, Bannon really does represent, in a way, the sort of beating heart of the Trumpist movement. And I can't help but feel that this was such an error, not just because it seems so politically motivated to go after him so quickly in this way. I mean, really to fast track this trial, to fast track these charges, but also, just the way in which the January 6th committee already is seen as so partisan, it already is seen as a political attempt to prevent former President Trump from ever holding office again. I mean, this just really adds to that sense of persecution that people in that camp feel. And why add to that? I mean, to what end? Why feed their sense of persecution to where it's actually now the DOJ going after them? And that's irrespective of whether he, was in contempt of, the Congress or whatever it is. That's sort of how I see it.
I think I do disagree. I think he is in contempt of Congress, and he could have responded to the subpoena, right, and just pled the fifth, not given any answers to any questions asked of him. That option is there. They weren't going to torture him. They weren't going to waterboard him and force him to say things. But he just did not respond to the subpoena, and this is what can happen when you don't do that. So it feels like maybe even, in fact, he wanted to be prosecuted in this way so that he can say, look, I'm being persecuted by, the Biden administration or whatnot. Maybe that's like his play here, because it seems to me like this was the likely outcome of his actions. So now we're doing this, and now he can say, oh, I'm being persecuted, but you could have responded to the subpoena. You could have just pled the fifth. Yes, is this a little bit of a sideshow to kind of go after, everyone connected to the Trump years? I get that he's, strongly associated with the MAGA movement, et cetera, but this isn't like, this isn't, catching him in some mistruth and, having some kind of obstruction of justice, sort of like it's easy to go after anyone for that kind of thing. To my mind, anyway, could be wrong. Looks to me like this is a pretty straight up, he ignored this subpoena and you can be prosecuted for doing that. And maybe that's what he wanted all along.
I don't think anybody wants to go to jail, but I also think it is a little bit immaterial about what he wanted. It's more like the spectacle that this creates to people who are our fellow Americans who have every right to be suspicious of institutions that have treated them poorly, who, are watching our institutions increasingly get co-opted by a faction of the far left. And then they see this man who is sort of, Steve Bannon's War Room is a very important journalistic outlet. I don't agree with much of what he says. Especially about Stop the Steal and so forth. But if you want to know what the beating heart of the MAGA movement sounds like, that you got to listen to that show. And those people are our fellow Americans. And we keep giving them, I guess this is the point, we keep giving them more and more reason to distrust the establishment when we should be trying to bring them back into the fold and behave in a way that is worthy of respect. And I think that this really is going to feed the worst elements of that. And I don't see why it was important. And I think many, many people have, ignored subpoenas and not been prosecuted by the DOJ. And so it does start to look like persecution to me.
We disagree on this one. And look, the January 6th stuff is going on and on and on. I've said over and over again on the show that I don't think we're getting we're getting new flavor, a little bit, more details come to light, more, I think, embarrassing information about Trump's mindset and literal actions the day of. But there's this desire, certainly among the people engaged in the January 6 hearings and also the mainstream media who, follows every development with total rapt attention, to find someone to punish for this, or to prove that there was some kind of conspiracy, or it was elaborately planned, Trump prior knowledge, it was deliberate. When what I saw when I was there, and everything that's come out about it ever since has confirmed to me that this was a spontaneous mob eruption that was not planned, that was not something Trump wanted to happen, or not something that that you could say that he caused to happen in some kind of moral responsibility sense, but certainly not in the sense of strict legal incitement. But and nothing that I've seen has changed my mind about that. What are your thoughts about January 6th stuff at this point?
I'm very deeply mind divided. So again, I disagree with you. I have learned a lot. I have changed my mind about a lot of things. At the same time, I do think that the American people are not interested and no longer watching, and this is not a top concern for them, and their concerns are extremely pressing. And so I'm very grossed out by the press class's obsession with this sideshow. I do think it's very deeply partisan. It's very highly produced. I do think the aim of this was to prevent Trump from being able to beat a Democratic president in a democratic way in the future. And I think that's very, very bad. At the same time, I have learned things from this that would prevent me from being able to vote for him. So I feel so conflicted about it, Robbie, because on the one hand, I feel like that was a very undemocratic thing to do, is to use the power of subpoena to expose things about a person so people wouldn't vote for him again because you're worried that you can't beat him because he's a good candidate, right? But on the other hand, I feel like I did learn things that were extremely incriminating. I don't know. I'm not a legal expert. I can't say whether it rises to the level of incitement or not, but I do feel that I learned things I'm glad to know. So I feel so conflicted about it.
Well, I think it has the effect the hearings are having. My understanding is that conservative media, or the people who run conservative media, are even more convinced than they were before that Donald Trump should not and cannot be the Republican presidential candidate next time. I think there's even more so. This was already going on to some extent, but I think it's pretty clear now. Like, no, they very much want DeSantis. They want to back DeSantis, and they're, I think, more courageous about doing that. No matter what the base wants, or viewers want, or readers want, they think Trump is not a is not an acceptable choice. It's too much of a liability given what's come out, and it's really got to be DeSantis, and they're going to back him. I think that was it was trending that way anyway, but this has made it much more, even more clear that that's the conservative media is going to get behind DeSantis.
It's not just the media. I mean, polling of conservatives, my own anecdotal, I know a lot of conservatives, a lot of people who were, extremely team MAGA, on the Trump train are now, to me, speaking about DeSantis, including some Democrats.
That's right. All right. Well, we'll have more Rising and more discussion in just a minute. Stay tuned.